The rain came in sheets that morning, slicing through the chill and blanketing the sleepy town of Willow Creek in a dense fog. Trees swayed in surrender to the wind, and the streets glistened like oil-painted brushstrokes. On the edge of town, where cracked pavement gave way to gravel paths and fenced-off fields, a black SUV skidded around a corner too quickly. The wheels hit the soft shoulder, and the vehicle lurched sideways, crashing into a weathered white picket fence with the sound of splintering wood and shattering pride. Inside the car, Nathaniel Hawk exhaled sharply and gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. His phone buzzed against the dashboard, yet another meeting missed, yet another assistant trying to keep the empire running while its king sat motionless in the wreckage of rural tranquility. From the front porch of the farmhouse the fence belonged to, Rowan Kelly stood with her flannel shirt sleeves rolled up, a chipped ceramic mug in her hand. She didn't flinch at the crash. She didn't even blink. Instead, she took one long sip of her coffee, her gaze fixed on the man now stepping out of the SUV in a suit worth more than her monthly income. He was tall, commanding, his coat soaked instantly by the rain. There was an edge to him that hadn't dulled with the weather, a man who didn't make mistakes, and when he did, paid someone else to clean them up. Rowan set her mug down on the railing and walked toward him, boots crunching on wet gravel. "You okay?" she asked, voice steady, uninterested in his status, his suit, or the fancy initials on his license plate that screamed corporate lease. Nathaniel looked up, startled. Yeah, I'm fine, lost traction. I was trying to avoid a dog or something." Rowan crouched by the fence, fingers brushing the ruined wood. "It's old," she said, more to herself than to him, "was bound to give eventually." "I'll pay for the damage," he said, too quickly. "I'm sure you will," she replied, not looking at him. "But that's not really the point, is it?" Nathaniel didn't know how to respond. This wasn't a press conference, a boardroom, or a merger. This was a small-town woman in a rain-drenched flannel shirt who didn't ask for a last name, didn't recognize his face from Forbes or financial blogs, and didn't care about the watch ticking on his wrist. She rose, eyes meeting his. "You want coffee?" He blinked. "Excuse me." "I figure you might need some," she said, "before you start calling the cavalry." He didn't answer right away. It had been 3 days since he'd left the Manhattan skyline behind for this place, reluctantly uprooted by court order and a custody agreement he hadn't read closely enough. His 7-year-old son, Luca, had fallen asleep in the backseat during the drive, head tilted to one side like he didn't care that their world was unraveling again. Inside the house, Rowan poured 2 cups of coffee without asking how he liked it. Her kitchen smelled like cardamom and apples, the kind of scent you don't manufacture. It lives in wood grain and oven cracks. She handed him a mug. "Cream in the fridge," she said, then added with a smirk, "but you look like the kind who takes it black and regrets it halfway through." Nathaniel took a cautious sip. It was scalding, bitter, perfect. "I'm Nathaniel," he said finally, though it sounded like a footnote. She just nodded. "Rowan." He glanced through the window at his SUV, sagging near the fence. "I really am sorry." Rowan leaned back against the counter. "Apologies are easy. Fixing things now that takes effort." The moment lingered, quiet except for the clink of mugs and the distant bark of a dog that had, perhaps, never existed. Then a soft thump came from the porch, small footsteps. Rowan tilted her head, watching as Luca appeared, blinking sleep from his eyes. The boy had a tousled mop of hair and the expression of someone used to waking up in unfamiliar places. "Dad?" he asked, rubbing one eye. Nathaniel stepped toward him, crouching. "It's okay, buddy, we just had a little detour." Luca looked past his father at Rowan. "Are we staying here?" Rowan smiled, warm and matter-of-fact. "Just for coffee, unless your dad crashes into more fences." The boy's lips curled into a sleepy grin. Nathaniel looked at her, something unspoken shifting in his chest. The kind of shift that wasn't strategic or timely, just real. Rowan broke the moment. "I've got tools in the shed. If you want to help me fix the fence tomorrow, bring gloves." He didn't answer right away. His instinct was to send someone, delegate, outsource the inconvenience. But his son was still smiling, still watching Rowan like she was something gentle in a world that moved too fast. Nathaniel nodded. "We'll be here." And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking of the next thing. He was just standing in a kitchen, holding a mug, letting something unnamed settle into his ribs like a second chance. Nathaniel came back the next morning, not in his tailored coat, but in a hoodie that still had a corporate logo stitched along the hem and jeans that looked brand new. He carried 2 sets of work gloves and a thermos of overpriced coffee that he offered sheepishly, like a peace offering from someone who'd never had to fix his own mistakes with actual tools. Rowan was already outside, kneeling near the base of the broken fence, sleeves rolled and hands in the dirt like it was an old friend. Her dog, Real this time, a shaggy mutt named Marlowe, lounged nearby, tail thumping lazily in the grass. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the mid-morning sun. "You're late." Nathaniel blinked at his watch. "It's 8:10. "I said early," she replied, standing and wiping her hands on her jeans. "Not business hour punctual." Luca trailed behind his father, clutching a juice box and scanning the open field like he wasn't sure whether it was meant to be explored or feared. Rowan nodded toward the boy. "You ever handled a hammer, city kid?" Luca straightened. "Once, I helped my dad build a Lego table. It collapsed." "Well," Rowan said, crouching again, "I'll let you practice on something less likely to hurt your feet." They worked in uneven silence. Nathaniel struggled to align the new planks, awkward under Rowan's quiet guidance. She didn't correct him sharply, but with a kind of patience he wasn't used to, letting him mess up once, twice, then showing him without words. Her hands told him what to do when her mouth didn't. It was Luca who thrived in it. The boy wasn't fragile, Nathaniel realized, just quiet, observant. He asked Rowan questions she actually answered. Why the fence curved at the corner, what kind of birds nested in the elm trees, if Marlowe liked bacon. He followed her like a shadow, sometimes picking up fallen nails, sometimes just standing beside her and watching. By midday, sweat clung to Nathaniel's back and he realized his son was laughing. Not the polite, distracted kind he gave to nannies or teachers, but the breathless kind that tumbled out without permission. Rowan wiped her brow and looked over the fence line. "Not bad," she said. "Bit crooked but solid. I can live with crooked." Nathaniel leaned on the shovel, catching his breath. "Is that a metaphor?" "Only if you want it to be." They ate lunch on her porch, grilled cheese and tomato soup that Rowan insisted was nothing special, though Luca asked for seconds. Nathaniel watched his son more than he ate, quietly cataloging the way the boy leaned against the porch railing, how his fingers relaxed around the spoon, how his laughter filled spaces Nathaniel hadn't realized were empty. After the meal, Rowan brought out a box of mismatched crayons and a stack of coloring pages from her niece's last visit. Luca settled on the steps with a kind of contentment that Nathaniel hadn't seen in the sleek, sterile apartment back in Manhattan. There, everything had been curated: perfect lighting, noise-canceling walls, a kitchen unused by anything but takeout. "You always live like this?" Nathaniel asked, gesturing at the open land, the quiet. Rowan tilted her head. "Like what?" "Unplugged, uncomplicated." She gave a slow smile. "It's not uncomplicated. The water heater breaks, the chickens get out, my roof leaks every spring, but it's mine, and I sleep at night." He looked at her, unsure if she was being sincere or simply trying to make a point. But the wind shifted just then, and he could smell wood smoke from the neighbor's chimney and feel the faint warmth of sun against his neck. For the first time in weeks, the hum in his chest, the anxiety, the guilt, the press of deadlines, went quiet. Later, after Luca fell asleep in Rowan's guest room, curled around Marlowe like they'd known each other forever, Nathaniel helped her wash dishes. The kitchen was dim now, lit by a single bulb over the sink. He handed her a dripping plate and their fingers touched, brief, accidental, but enough. "You didn't have to invite us in," he said quietly. "I didn't have to rebuild a fence either," she replied, drying the plate and placing it on the rack. "But you did." She looked at him then, something softer in her eyes, less guarded. "Sometimes," she said, "people deserve a little grace, especially when they don't know how to ask for it." Nathaniel didn't respond. He just stood there, still holding the next plate, listening to the quiet sounds of his son breathing in the next room, to the faint tick of the old kitchen clock, to the space between her words. That night they didn't talk about what brought him to Willow Creek, or the custody agreement that felt more like a punishment than a path forward. They didn't talk about courtrooms or corporate battles or the way his life had unraveled so publicly 6 months ago. But when he left, carrying Luca in his arms and whispering thanks into the dark, Rowan didn't lock the door behind him. She left the porch light on. The rhythm settled in slowly, like morning mist clinging to the fields outside Rowan's farmhouse. One visit turned into two, then three, not always with an excuse but never quite without one either. Nathaniel began to show up on weekends, sometimes on weekdays too, depending on how chaotic the remote boardrooms were. He brought his laptop and answered calls from the back porch while Rowan tended to her modest garden beds or hauled feed to the coop. Occasionally she would pause by him, offer a slice of apple, or toss a sarcastic comment over her shoulder when he sounded too much like the man he'd been before the crash. Luca became a fixture, barefoot, curious, a smudge of dirt always on his cheek and knees grass-stained from afternoons spent chasing Marlowe. Rowan taught him how to pick tomatoes without bruising them, how to find frogs by the creek if you stayed quiet enough. He began leaving drawings taped to her fridge. Sometimes they were messy, but one caught Nathaniel's eye: a crooked house, a dog, a woman in a red flannel, and a stick figure boy holding her hand. When he looked at Rowan after seeing it, she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. One afternoon, Rowan found herself in her makeshift workshop, sawing a piece of pine to repair the shed door. Nathaniel stood nearby, watching her like she might vanish if he blinked too long. He wasn't in a suit, hadn't been for weeks now. The clothes he wore were less about presentation and more about function. There were paint flecks on his sleeves from helping Luca decorate birdhouses. "You always do things yourself," he observed. Rowan didn't look up. "Not always, just when I can't afford not to." He watched her steady hands, the way she guided the saw, patient and exact. "I don't think I've ever built anything real, not like this." "You've built a company." He shrugged. "That doesn't make my kids smile the way this place does." She set the saw down, met his eyes. "Then maybe you're just now starting to build the things that matter." Nathaniel exhaled, almost laughed. "I don't know what I'm doing, Rowan." "That makes two of us." Their closeness hung there for a moment, charged but unspoken. Then Luca burst into the shed, arms flailing, breathless from running. "Marlowe found something by the creek," he shouted. "It might be a turtle or maybe a rock with legs." Rowan chuckled, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Guess we've got a mystery on our hands." Later that week, Nathaniel's ex called. It wasn't dramatic, but it was tense. She'd heard about Willow Creek, about the woman Luca kept mentioning. Nathaniel stood by the old oak in Rowan's yard, the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the voice on the other end twist suspicion into something acidic. "She's just a neighbor," he said finally. Rowan was on the porch, arms folded, her face unreadable. When he ended the call, she didn't ask what was said, but she watched him differently, not suspiciously, just with a quiet kind of knowing. Like she understood the gravity of what he was trying to hold together and how much of it had already slipped through his fingers. That night they sat in silence. Rowan didn't offer coffee. Nathaniel didn't ask. Luca had fallen asleep early, curled up with Marlowe and a flashlight still clutched in one hand. The house was hushed, wrapped in the low murmur of crickets and the creak of old wood. "Do you want more than this?" he asked suddenly, voice low. "This quiet life, this routine?" Rowan thought for a long time before answering. "I think," she said slowly, "I stopped asking myself that question after my sister passed. I spent a lot of years chasing bigger things, more money, more freedom, more something. And then I was handed my niece in this house and the questions changed. To what? To whether I can show up, whether I can make something steady, whether I can be enough without running." Nathaniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And are you?" "Most days," she said, "but I don't think enough is a finish line. I think it's a choice." He nodded, rubbing his jaw. "I've been trying to outrun my life. Thought if I just worked harder, earned more, controlled everything, I'd be okay. But Luca, not impressed by titles. He just wants someone who's not on the phone all the time." Rowan studied him then, not with pity but with something quieter. Empathy, maybe, or the echo of understanding. "You can stay here tonight," she said softly. "No expectations, just stay." Nathaniel hesitated, then nodded. She led him to the small guest room next to Luca's. It was simple, a little dusty, but warm. The bed creaked when he sat down. There was a window cracked just enough to let in the sound of the night, and a faded quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Rowan lingered in the doorway. "Good night, Nathaniel." He looked at her and wanted to say something honest, something that mattered, but he only said, "Good night, Rowan." And when the door clicked shut, it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a beginning. The autumn air crept in slowly, curling around the edges of mornings with a breath of wood smoke and turning leaves. The town of Willow Creek began its quiet transformation. Porches were dressed with pumpkins, the diner switched from iced tea to cider, and the breeze carried the scent of cinnamon and earth. Nathaniel stayed longer now. Not every night, not without hesitation, but enough that the back seat of his SUV held Luca's muddy sneakers and a stack of school library books. Enough that Rowan stopped flinching when she heard tires on gravel and started putting out a third plate at dinner without thinking. Their lives had begun to overlap, not through grand declarations but in shared groceries, school drop-offs, and the silent passing of tools across a workbench. Nathaniel had started helping with the roof repairs, his hands clumsy but eager, learning how to trust the slow rhythm of things that didn't need quarterly reports or bottom lines. And Rowan, for all her independence, had found herself waiting, not for his promises, just for the sound of the screen door and Luca's excited chatter, for the ease that had replaced the guarded way she once looked at him. Then came the invitation. It arrived in Nathaniel's inbox just before midnight, a formal email with delicate language and sharp undertones. His ex-wife's law firm was requesting a review of the custody agreement, a polite way of saying, "You're too far, you've drifted, let's bring this back into the fold." He read it twice, then again. The threat wasn't loud, but it was real. His pulse ticked like a countdown. He didn't sleep. The next day he watched Luca run down Rowan's hill, arms stretched wide, hair wild, laughing as Marlowe chased him in circles. Rowan stood by the clothesline, pinning up sheets that fluttered like sails. Nathaniel walked to her, email printed and folded in his back pocket. "I need to go back to New York," he said, "for a little while." Rowan didn't pause, didn't react. She kept her hands moving, steady. "Court?" "Not yet," he said, "but it's heading that way." She nodded, pinning the last corner. "And what do you want to do?" "I don't know. I want him to be happy. He is here, but if I fight this, if I stay, it could backfire." Rowan turned to face him fully, then fight differently. "How?" "Don't just show up here. Show them who you are now. Show her, show the court." He watched her, this woman who asked nothing of him, and gave everything quietly. "I'm not sure who I am now." "You're becoming," she said simply. "That's enough." He left 3 days later with Luca and a duffel bag. There were no promises, only a long look from Rowan as they stood at the edge of the porch. No kiss. No goodbye wrapped in longing. Just her hand brushing his shoulder when she passed him a lunch bag filled with homemade oatmeal cookies and a thermos of coffee that smelled faintly of cinnamon. "Take care of him," she said, "and yourself." The drive back to the city was quiet. Luca played with a carved wooden bird Rowan had whittled for him, its wings etched with initials he didn't recognize but held like treasure. In Manhattan the pace was jarring. Lights were always on, voices always raised. Nathaniel's apartment felt like a box, modern, cold, efficient. He moved through it with the ghost of farm dust on his shoes and the weight of small-town quiet still in his bones. Luca asked about Rowan every night, just little things, if Marlowe missed him, if the chickens still escaped the pen, if the sun still came through her kitchen window the same way. And Nathaniel found himself answering with a lump in his throat. The court date was set 2 weeks out. He got a new lawyer, not one who knew his company, but one who understood custody battles and the subtle art of telling the truth on paper. He began documenting everything, photos of Luca playing in the open fields, notes about school projects Rowan helped with, letters from neighbors in Willow Creek who had seen the change in him. But most of all, he wrote something else, a statement. Not a legal defense, not an argument, just a truth. He wrote about the crash into the fence, about the coffee, about the way Luca smiled at Rowan and how he, Nathaniel, had learned to fix things with his hands for the first time in his life. He wrote about the silence that had healed him more than therapy ever could. He wrote about second chances. And then on a quiet Tuesday morning, he mailed it. Not to the court. To Rowan. She didn't call right away, but when she did, her voice was soft, almost tentative. I read it. He swallowed too much. No, she said, just unexpected. He wanted to say more. Wanted to tell her that the city didn't fit anymore, that he kept waiting for her flannel shirts in a sea of tailored suits, that every time he passed a coffee shop, he thought of her mug on the porch railing. But instead he said, thank you, for showing me a different way to be. She was quiet a moment. You found it yourself, Nathaniel, I just kept the porch light on. The call ended there, but something had shifted, not the dramatic kind, the kind that settles into your chest like breath you didn't know you'd been holding. The hearing came and went. His ex's tone had softened, not from strategy but from truth. Luca spoke for himself when asked, said he liked Willow Creek because the stars were closer there, said his dad smiled more when he smelled like firewood. Nathaniel won partial custody in the city, but more importantly, earned the right to take Luca back for extended stretches, months instead of weekends, seasons instead of holidays. He packed slowly this time, not because he dreaded the trip, because he was finally heading home. By the time Nathaniel pulled off the highway and onto the narrow back road that led into Willow Creek, winter was pressing just behind the hills. The trees were bare now, their branches etched like veins against the steel-gray sky. The fields had gone golden and dry, and the morning frost clung to fence posts like lace. Luca was asleep in the passenger seat this time, taller now, legs curled against the seatbelt, a sketchbook open on his lap. On the last page in rough pencil was a drawing of Rowan's house. The crooked fence had been redrawn, mended. Marlowe stood in the yard, and in the window 2 figures, one small, one tall, neither labeled. Nathaniel turned down the final stretch of gravel and slowed when he saw the porch light on. She kept it on. Whether for him or out of habit, he didn't know, but it was glowing. Rowan was in the yard, tying burlap around the trunks of her young trees. She looked up as the SUV rolled to a stop and took a moment before walking toward it, dusting her gloves off on her jeans. No smile, not yet, just watching. He stepped out carefully, quietly, like someone approaching something sacred. The cold bit his skin, but he didn't mind. I got your letter, she said, voice carrying easily in the open air. He nodded. I meant every word. Rowan looked at him for a long time, eyes softer than he remembered, or maybe he just saw them clearly now. I know. Luca stirred, yawning as he climbed out of the car, backpack swinging off one shoulder. He didn't hesitate. He just ran to Marlowe, who came bounding from the side of the house with a bark that shook the stillness. The boy fell into the dog's fur with laughter, the kind that came from deep inside. Rowan's gaze followed him. He looks taller. He is, Nathaniel said. He's braver, too. Started asking questions about things I don't always have answers for. Rowan nodded. That's how you know you're raising someone good. Nathaniel took a step closer, then another. I didn't come back with a plan this time, not with an angle, just, with time. I've got the next 3 months off, gave up the board seat, moved the office remote. Rowan raised an eyebrow. You left the company. No, he said, I just stopped letting it own me. There was something like approval in the way she looked at him then, but it didn't come with praise, just a quiet kind of welcome. Inside, the kitchen was almost the same. A new calendar hung on the fridge, a few more drawings. The kettle still whistled the same soft tune. Nathaniel watched as she poured 2 mugs, slid his toward him without ceremony. You kept my mug, he asked. Rowan shrugged. It was still good for something. They sat in the glow of the low afternoon sun, the warmth of it cutting the chill from their skin. Luca ran in and out with Marlowe, his laughter rising like birdsong, and Nathaniel let the sound wrap around him like a blanket. Rowan watched him out of the corner of her eye. You look different. He glanced at her, better or worse. Lighter, she said, like someone finally took the briefcase out of your hand. He smiled. I don't even miss it. They didn't say much after that, Just let the quiet fill the spaces where words would have cluttered, the kind of silence you only earn after enough time spent listening. As dusk set in, Rowan stood and walked to the window, arms crossed. Nathaniel followed, and they stood there side by side, watching Luca make shapes in the frost with his fingers, his cheeks red and his nose running but too happy to care. Nathaniel's voice came low. "I don't know what we are, Rowan. I just know I feel more like myself when I'm here." Rowan didn't turn. "That's not nothing." He reached for her hand slowly, cautiously. When she didn't pull away, he threaded his fingers through hers. "I don't need it to be everything," he said, "just real." Rowan finally looked up at him, and something softened in her face, like snow melting on a roof after a long winter. "It's been real from the start, Nathaniel. That was always the difference." Outside, the porch light blinked on again, not because someone flipped a switch, but because it had a timer set to dusk. A small, dependable thing, always there when you needed to find your way back. Nathaniel leaned against the windowsill, Rowan's hand still in his, Luca's voice echoing down the yard. The frost thickened, the air grew quieter, and the house stood firm, lived in, imperfect. Mended, not flawless, but steady. Like them. Like second chances often are.